4 Supreme Court questions for the Supreme Court in birthright citizenship cases. Let's take a look at this reporting today by CNN. The article today, ladies and gentlemen, is titled 4 Questions in the Supreme Court Arguments in Birthright. 4 questions in the Supreme Court arguments in birthright citizenship cases. And ladies and gentlemen, the article reads, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on May 15 in 3 cases challenging an executive order President Donald Trump on January 20th signed on January 20th, purporting to limit who is entitled to birthright citizenship. Example, who automatically becomes a U.S. citizen if they are born on U.S. soil. The argument is not formally about whether Trump's policy is constitutional, but is instead focused on a technical question about the injunctions that 3 different lower courts issued to block the policy from taking effect. The court's ultimate decision will have a lot to say about whether and to what extent the policy is allowed to go into effect. While extraordinarily significant, that is not necessarily the same thing as ruling on the policy's legality. It is distinctly possible that the Supreme Court will go out of its way to not address whether Trump's policy is constitutional in a ruling that nonetheless allows it to go into effect across much, if not most, of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the policy? Well, we're about to find that out. Trump's order directs federal agencies to not recognize as citizens individual born in the United States on or after February 19th if at the time of their birth, 1, their father was not a citizen or lawful permanent resident green card holder, and 2, their mother was either unlawfully present in the United States or lawfully present with only temporary status. Example, a student visa. The executive order reflects a dramatic shift from what had been the consistent U.S. practice going back to the ratification of the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment in 1868, which provides that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Under that text, as interpreted by the Supreme Court in 1898, the immigration status of the child's parents has historically been irrelevant to whether a child born on U.S. soil is a citizen. Congress also passed a law in 1940 consistent with that understanding. Thus, the Trump policy would condition citizenship in many future cases on the mother's immigration status at the time of the child's birth. The policy itself would have no retroactive effect on those who are already citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the current status of the policy? Well, we're about to find that out. Multiple lawsuits were filed almost as soon as the executive order was signed, seeking to block it, and within days, the order was blocked by a number of federal courts, including as relevant here, federal district courts in Massachusetts, Maryland, and the state of Washington. Each of those courts entered preliminary injunctions concluding that the executive order was unlawful, blocking it indefinitely while the government appealed. As especially relevant here, each of the injunctions were nationwide injunctions, meaning they blocked the government not just from applying the policy to the plaintiffs in those cases, but from applying it to anyone, even those living outside of those three judicial districts. Thus, when the Trump administration asked the Federal Appeals Court to pause those injunctions, it also asked them in the alternative to at least narrow the injunctions so that they'd apply only to the plaintiffs. All three appeals courts, the Boston-based First Circuit, the Richmond-based Fourth Circuit, and the San Francisco-based Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, turned down both requests. That's when the Trump administration took all three cases to the Supreme Court. The Trump administration has framed its request to limit the injunctions as a modest one. But if the court were to grant the request, it would allow officials to enforce the policy throughout most of the nation against everyone other than the plaintiffs in these three cases. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the Supreme Court going to decide? We will find that out right now. The technical But critical point here is that the Trump administration is not formally asking the Supreme Court to get rid of the injunctions altogether and uphold the policy. It's asking only for the second type of relief it sought in the courts of appeals, to narrow the three injunctions so that they apply only to the plaintiffs. I highly doubt they're going to allow it to only apply to the plaintiffs, or to everyone else but the plaintiffs, because it's blatantly illegal and unconstitutional. And the Constitution already outlines citizenship, so Trump needs to just SCFU and shut the front door. Continuing with the news breaking reporting. This ties into concerns that the administration of both parties have raised about the power of courts to freeze a president's policies nationwide. By raising that argument in the context of the highly controversial birthright citizenship policy, it is a transparent attempt to get the court to rule for the Trump administration without having to hold that these new limits on birthright citizenship are constitutional. If the court sides with Trump, the practical effect would be largely the same. If the Supreme Court narrows 3 district courts' injunctions to only the handful of specific named plaintiffs in the 3 cases, then the result would be to allow the Trump policy to go into effect against everyone else, albeit without the Supreme Court specifically holding it. Of course, non-citizens would be affected by the policy who are not parties to one of these 3 cases, could bring their own lawsuits challenging it, and would likely succeed in those lawsuits, but their claims would have to be litigated on an individual basis, which would only take some time, but might be beyond the resources of at least some of those who might be impacted. Ladies and gentlemen, when will the Supreme Court decide? We're about to find that out. These cases reached the Supreme Court in an unusual posture. Their, quote, emergency applications, unquote, on the so-called shadow docket, not regular appeals. The May 15 argument will be only the 4th time since 1971 that the court has held oral arguments on this kind of emergency request. In 2 of the 3 prior cases, the January 2022 COVID-19 vaccination mandate disputes, the court ruled quite quickly within 1 week of the argument. But in the third case, just last year, the Google neighbor ozone pollution cases, the court issued its ruling as part of the regular end-of-year flurry in late June. We certainly expect a ruling no later than then, but it could come much faster. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for today's legal breaking reporting on the birthright citizenship clause. If you did enjoy this video, please firstly like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy. If you did enjoy this video, and you do like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy, and want to make sure you stay up to date on all the things legal breaking on the side of politics, please hit the bell icon and hit the all notifications option that is right next to the subscribe button down below. It does not cost anything. Thirdly, please help me reach and achieve the goal of 160 plus subscribers. Fourthly, if you guys also want to make sure you stay up to date on all the things legal breaking reporting wise on the side of politics, please follow me on my social medias. That'll be linked down below in the video description. I'm on Instagram, Snapchat, Threads, as well as TikTok. There I will be posting when I've uploaded a brand new legal breaking analysis news reporting video on to the channel. Fifthly, ladies and gentlemen, please stay positive, please stay safe, and know that justice will prevail on the correct side of the law eventually, despite Donald Trump and his illegal, unconstitutional, criminal regime and administration's unconstitutional, illegal executive orders and actions and behaviors.